Good afternoon, Luke.
Good afternoon, Angie. Okay.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Really good. Good to sit and have a chat with you today.
Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me on. Really enjoying it. Looking forward to it.
You're welcome. I was quite intrigued by the post you put on the portal the other day about that whiskey being stolen. And honest Gov, it wasn't me. Anybody who knows me well knows that I do like a tot of whiskey. So obviously it caught my eye when I saw that post go on. But I mean, I was astounded, really, at how quickly they got in there, got that. They obviously knew what they were looking for, didn't they? And got back out again. I mean, how does that happen, Luke?
Oh, it was thoroughly professional, if you ask me. It's one of those ones where you sit back and go, they've done their homework, and you kind of think, well, you know what, people have done their homework, they've worked hard at it, give them a break. But in actual fact, it's an epitome of some of the things that are wrong. I mean, generally, basic security measures are okay for sort of opportunist crime, but when you look at organised criminals that know what they're doing, know what they're targeting, you've got to have a bit more now. So you've got to have a bit more protection in place. And yeah, you're right. 4 minutes, I think, 4 minutes from sort of going through, drilling a lock to getting what they came for, and then leaving. I think the CCB has got their guys in I think balaclavas or something, and they've got a white van in and out within 4 minutes. Yeah.
And I think this is what we forget a lot of the time is that the organised crime, these guys are professionals. They know what they're doing. They know who they want to target. And they make a living out of it, don't they? As you say, they're not opportunists.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when people say organised crime, generally people have the idea of mafia, and people sort of what a big boss stroking his cat and deciding, right, let's go and target that. But in actual fact, it could just be sort of a group of 2 or 3 people and sort of, or see something and think, right, well, what can we do with that? And it can be from stealing bikes from a bike shop, where we've sort of heard stories of people with literally fishing hooks, fishing reels, fishing down through the ceiling of a bike shop, and then hooking the bikes up out through the skylight. When we say organised crime, it's just literally is people have a plan of what they want to do and execute that plan, and that's kind of it is. An opportunity is someone will just walk past and say, oh, let's go and do that. There's a distinct difference, and with the downturn, people's wallets are getting tight. Everyone knows cash is tight at the moment, and the idea of people going to these nefarious ends to make the ends meet will absolutely happen. And when it comes to providing for family, getting cash so your kids and wife can eat, automatically it changes the outlook of people. And I think recently, actually, it was in the news that criminals that are doing crime, for example, stealing food to feed their family, should be looked at less seriously. So people should be given the benefit of the doubt. So it's definitely on the cards. I think people are aware of what's going to happen over the next sort of 6 months or so. I think something that businesses need to be aware of as well, I suppose.
I think so too, definitely. And I think, again, when we talk about risk, when we talk about crime, when we talk about security, a lot of businesses will think, well, that's just for the bigger businesses who've got big premises. But it's not, is it, Luke? All businesses should be looking at their security, shouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, you're singing my song. I think every business should look at security. A lot of businesses pay lip service to it, or they'll pay lip service to it, or they'll look at, say, right, well, let's do security for the business, right? Well, let's tick these boxes, and then we've got security. Whereas in an ideal situation, or what the real issue, a business should drill down and figure out what they're protecting. So their assets, say their end product, and they look at all the things they use to deliver that end product. And every one of those assets will draw some level of risk, some higher than others. Some will have a greater impact on the business than others, and that's where sort of the risk risk lives rather than sort of just threat is a potential something. The risk is the likelihood and the impact of something occurring. So it might be sort of bikes as the end product, or in the idea of whiskey, the whiskies as the end product is getting stolen. But a manufacturer might have highly valuable metal in their supply chain that might be seen as something that's worth stealing, and it's a commodity, and people understand the value of commodities and assets, and that's where businesses really need to sort of just have some understanding of what it is, what their assets are in their business that can look at, that they need to protect. And I think Adam Payne made the in fact it was Steve Murphy made the comment on the ConeX Portal saying, well, this whiskey, it's like fine art. Surely they can't sell it on. Well, that's about that it's quite easy. There's always a marketplace for these things. People always looking to make some cash and stuff. So it's something that's easy to move on and make some money on.
Well, that's right. I mean, we've seen over the years where fine art has been stolen, and some of it is never actually resurfaced, has it? And it's bound to be in some private collector's collection somewhere, isn't it? So there is always a market.
Absolutely, and what Steve said was quite right. It's like fine art, and it is like fine art. You think, well, these bottles of whiskey are worth thousands of pounds. I think that it was over 100,000 pounds worth of stock went missing, and I couldn't believe, if you looked at the picture, and all I can give a view is from the pictures. It was in like a cupboard. It was in a locked cupboard with a store behind it. And you think, well, why are they storing that amount of asset in such a flimsy cupboard? I mean, one of the tactics that fine art use is they replace an asset. So if they've got, say, the Mona Lisa, for example, is on display, it won't actually be the Mona Lisa; it'll be a copy of the Mona Lisa. So it's not worth that value. It just makes me wonder why they didn't just replace that whiskey with something that looks like whiskey, for example, in the box, in the bottle. So you can still say, right, well, that's whiskey, but actually, it doesn't have that same value when you're displaying it. And it's something that wouldn't cost anything. It wouldn't cost anything to be able to do that. But you still, and if it does happen, then you're not losing that value. So it was a weird one, I thought, on me.
It was, and as you say, why even leave it in a flimsy cupboard? You know the value of it. Why aren't you looking at your security? Why aren't you bringing in somebody like Equilibrium Risk to actually look at it and say, do you know what? This is such easy pickings. We would recommend, and go from there, really, because it's not just the value of what's been stolen, is it, Luke? It's the knock-on effects to the business as well afterwards.
Yeah, so the risk, you look at risk as sort of the likelihood of an event occurring and the impact should it occur. That's a bit easy way of sort of understanding the value of, or the size of a risk. But then if you look at an incident happening, like for example this whiskey, you've got the direct cost. So that's going to cost them £100,000, £150,000 to replace that asset. Yeah. But then you've also got the indirect cost. So the stuff that happens around that to help to recover from that impact, from that incident, for example. So if they've got broken locks, broken cupboards, the amount of manpower it takes to get all that back to normal, for example. Yeah. But then you look at, well, if it's £100,000 worth of asset, how much more trading does that company need to make in order to recoup that cost? And there is a sort of sum you can do to work it out. It depends on sort of the level of your how much profit you make, what percentage of profit you make. But you sort of multiply that by your percentage, and you'll think, well, that's how much trading I need to do to recoup that loss. So, in one sense, yes, it is a big problem, but in actual fact, it's a lot bigger than you first think, I suppose.
That's right, and particularly, if it's assets of the business that have been stolen, you then find that your staff can't continue the business properly because they haven't got the tools that they need to actually do their job, have they? So then you're paying wages for people who are sitting around and can't do their job, as well as having to replace what was stolen. And as you say, that loss of profit, because you're then on catch up trying to, once you have got the tools, been out and bought new tools, it's then catch up then, isn't it, to try and
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it's quite straightforward in this instance. If we're talking about the whiskey side, it's quite straightforward because from a manufacturer's point of view, that's the end product. That's the product ready to go, and that's ready to dispatch to clients or to wherever it needs to go. So the loss of that is a direct cost, and then whatever with their indirect costs after that. So it's quite straightforward. But if you look at things further down the production line, a machine or something else that's used to make that, then it becomes a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
So, like you say, if you remove that asset, then the process, then the following processes can't take place, and so you're then losing manpower, losing efficiency, and the business is not delivering what it's supposed to do, and then that's where costs really can mount up. And sort of going back to my previous point, manufacturers need to understand what their assets are in that process, in that production line, to deliver that end product, and make sure each part of it is protected according to the level of risk it draws, to then stop losing that money and making the business as efficient as possible.
That's right. And of course, it's not just assets either. I mean, we also need to look at people as well, don't we? Within the risk factor.
Yeah, people will always be sort of the most important asset in a business, and looking after those people is vital. But then there's also what we call intangible assets, so things you can't actually physically touch. So for example, reputation, IP, that sort of stuff. There's those aspects of the business that also need to be considered. And I mean, I don't know I can't remember, I should say, the name of the distillery that produced this whiskey, but to be able for a manufacturer and we've seen quite big incidents in the public domain of incidents that have happened this year. They only happen that all that will do is deteriorate the reputation of the manufacturer. So there are other things to consider as well, rather than just sort of physical assets as well, because one of the key aspects of any business is reputation. It can take years and years to build and less than a second to destroy.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. So just going back to the points you made on that post, you said about there's always indicators. So are there things we should be looking for within our business, or are the indicators sort of specific to particular businesses?
Yeah, so there are always indicators leading up to it. It's very, very rarely. I mean, we talk about opportune criminals. There are very rarely sort of things that happen without any warning whatsoever. So, for example, if you consider the insider threat, so people within an organisation, there's something in their background. Say, for example, lack of cash, for example, or they're in a divorce, or they've got family problems or something. There's always these little indicators that you think, right, we'll need to pay attention. People that wander around looking at things, for example, the whiskey, guaranteed they knew where that, or they did know where that whiskey was. So they'd have had a look where it was. They'd have had a look how it's secured. They've had a look at the door, how it's secured. They'd have reckoned their route into there, and they'd have reckoned their route out. So every single stage of that incident would have been thought through and planned beforehand. So the fact that it didn't get picked up was people weren't paying attention. So when we talk about a security culture, so in the sense that it's everybody's job in that business to provide security or increase the security of that business. So things like noticing people when they're walking around, or notice people when they're not when they're not supposed to be. One of the reasons what we sort of say wear a name badge, so you can identify members of staff and visitors and stuff, so you can see what's going on in the business. So there are indicators. They might be tiny, they might be very, very small, but the fact that something happens as a surprise doesn't mean it happens as a surprise. It means you weren't paying attention to the indicators. And it goes all right. We can say this about crime, but it also goes on to other risks. So for environmental risk, for example, when sort of floods and stuff hit, or fires, we know that there are indicators, the climate change being one of them. I'm not going to sort of go into that now, but there are indicators leading up to that level. You just need to be aware and make sure you've got people aware and are looking around. It's sort of situational awareness, I would call it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, we're on quite the same level. You know, I did 15 years working in commercial insurance, so risk was a big thing for me. Going out to clients' premises, looking at the risk, looking at all types of risk. And I know I've banged on in the past about business continuity plans, because that, you know, is a similar thing. You look at what risks there are within the business. And that's exactly what you do, isn't it? Is to go out and look at the risks within the business and how the business can mitigate those.
Yeah, but I think I do. But I think one of the reasons why businesses don't do it is because they're worried about the result, for example, or they're worried it's going to be difficult to do.
Or costly, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think it is. I mean, if a business sort of drills down to the assets and see what those assets are along the way, and then they can look at the threats to that asset. So generally, I mean, you think threats we group into four distinct areas just to make it a lot easier to think about. You've got an insider threat, so someone inside the business, and you've got an outsider threat. Those are generally the two types of people you'll get. You've got accidental, something that happens as an accident, and then you've got something malicious. And all threats will fit into one of those four categories, and you can sort of group those into those four categories. And then once you've done that, then you can just look at you can just consider the impact. What's going to happen if this happens? Is it something that I need to be worried about? Is it going to have a massive impact or a small impact? And then all of a sudden, everything starts becoming clear. You think, oh well, what about this? What about that? And then you can then start taking steps to protect that. But one of the key things we try to get across is the fact is, just because you identify a risk doesn't mean you have to do something about it. You don't have to spend money. I mean, it all goes down to your risk appetite. If you're quite happy with that level of risk, or for example, to reduce that risk, it's going to cost you £1,000, but the value of the asset is only £100. There's no point in spending £1,000 to protect something that's £100. So it's about understanding those risks, and then we talk about when we manage the risk for a client. Incidents do happen. We know they do happen, but it's a case of, are they within tolerances? Is it within an acceptable parameter to say, right, we can carry on going? Yes or no. If it's not, then you can make adjustments. If it is, then we'll carry on going. I think one of the worst things to do is just pay lip service to security and just see where it goes. And if it happens, it happens. But then all you do is then when something happens, you jump and think, right, we need to spend £4,000, £10,000 on this so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, but you're bolting the stable door, aren't you, after the horses? Absolutely, yeah. And it was quite interesting just going back to us talking about indicators. I remember years ago, again, when I was working in insurance, one of our clients, their alarm was triggered one evening on their premises. And obviously the alarm company went out, couldn't see any issues, reset the alarm, went away again. It was triggered for a second time that night. They went out again, no issues. It was triggered a third time, and this time the owner of the business said, look, just leave the alarm off. There's obviously an issue with the alarm. So they did. They left the alarm off. And of course, that was the ideal opportunity then for the assailants to come in. They'd done it on purpose. They'd triggered the alarm 3 times on purpose, so that they knew that would happen. And they were straight in and took everything.
Yeah, it's a well-known tactic. I think in the olden days, what they used to do was let a balloon off in a post box, let the balloon off through the post hole, and let the balloon go. It'll obviously trigger whatever it needs to go. The alarm will go off, and all that. And people know it used to be sort of 20 minutes, half an hour reaction time. They wait for that reaction time, see who comes along. If they know no one's coming within half an hour, then they're kind of they're free to do what they want. It's a common tactic to see what the response is. Because I think we put our manual out about delivering security as a layered approach. So you don't want a single layer of security. You want multiple layers. So if one layer of security fails, you've got the next layer. You've got the next layer. You've got the next layer, etc. And one of the layers is response. So if something goes wrong on your detection will say, right, something's happened. You've got to have a reasonable response to this to follow up on that detection. To do 2 things: stop any adverse any adverse effect, and then get the business back to normal as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And the idea is that if you have a lot of businesses stop at detection, but they don't have the follow-up method of finding out what the cause was and then stopping that cause. And again, making sure that it's robust enough to continue. I think from this whiskey episode, I think 4 minutes, and I'm not sure anyone, unless they're sat outside protecting that asset, would have got there in 4 minutes.
No.
So automatically then you think, well, hold on a second, if it's going to take 4 minutes to enter and steal the asset and get out, then you've got to have a response in place that's quicker than 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And there's two things there you can do there. You can actually have a security guard on site, which is very costly, or you can increase your levels of security. And security is like we say, layers. It's barriers. So you've got to have barriers in place so your detection will alert you that something's wrong, and then you've got barriers in place to slow that assailant down enough time for you to get there, stop them stealing what they're going to steal before they can get in and get out. And that's generally the basic rule to security. Make sure your response is quicker than what the assailant can do.
It makes perfect sense. It really does, Luke.
Yeah.
So if you could give a business one tip, what would it be? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Well, we all know prevention is better than the cure. That's a general one. The earlier you know about. So I talked about golden rules on my post. I said golden rule number 1: you can't affect the motivation, but you can control the opportunity. And golden rule number 3 was what was golden rule 3? Got me now.
Can't control the motivations of an event occurring.
And number 1, so that was 3 and 1. Anyway, so whatever it was, I'll have to reread it. Golden rule number 2 is the earlier aware event, the more options you have to deal with that event, and the safer you will feel. And obviously, the reverse of that is true. So the later you're aware of something, the less time you have, and the more unsafe you'll feel. So that's my number 1 tip, I suppose.
Fantastic. And obviously, if anybody wants any help or advice, they can contact you through the portal.
Absolutely, yeah. Always there to provide advice and help whenever I can. Great
stuff. Well, it's been brilliant chatting with you, Luke.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invite. Really enjoyed it.
No problem at all. Thanks for your time today, and hopefully it will have been of use to some of our members.
Yeah, have a lovely weekend.
And you. Bye.